afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this version of Quaestionare in English. In this week's episode, I'm here with Valeria Kutoleng and Dr. Samuel Stone, and we're here to discuss some important topics and specific situations that has been going on with the United States-Mexico relationship, not specifically as the other weeks that we have covered, mainly the vaccination process in both countries and the situation in the Mexican northern border, United States southern border, regarding the migration crisis that has struck this government, that has been the major challenge that Biden administration has faced in the first 100 days of his administration, of his government. But this week we have topics that, yes, are related with migration and COVID, but that are not happening within the border. We have an announcement that was made by the White House, by the Office of the Vice President, that Vice President Kamala Harris is making her first official state visit to Central America, specifically to this northern triangle that has been referred as the zone where the migration exports countries has concentrated, which is Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Guatemala, which are the countries that are sending the most migrants into the southern border of the United States. This is going to be important because I don't remember when was the last time Vice President or President of the United States visited this zone to talk and discuss topics regarding the migration and addressing the causes of migration, which was one of the main topics of discussion and one of the main areas of Joe Biden's campaign regarding the migration situation. He said that he was going to address the causes of migration, and this seems to be in accordance to what he was saying in campaign. Secondly, we're going to discuss also what happened in the world's climate summit that happened last Thursday, I believe, where President Biden was the host of this online meeting because of the COVID-19 situation, but they talk really important things regarding climate change and how we're getting affected. Let's remember that 2020 was like a gap year for climate change because lots of people didn't use their cars, didn't move, didn't travel in airplane, didn't consume and they will do it regularly. The climate change situation changed for good. But now in 2021, as the world starts to seem getting more normal, we are facing different situations. And I'm coming with you first, Dr. Stone. What to expect about this new visit of Vice President Kamala Harris to the Northern Triangle? Is there anything we can expect as she gets there?
Sure. So first of all, right, as you said, it's been a while since an American president has been in Central America. The last, unsurprisingly, Donald Trump never went to Central America, despite how he used the issues of migration to his benefit, right, in the 2016 and 2018 campaigns. But more importantly, right, when was the last time? Well, Obama was in Central America 3 times over the course of his term. In 2015, he was in Panama. In 2013, he was in Costa Rica. But the last time an American president visited the Northern Triangle countries, right, of Guatemala, Salvador, and Honduras was 10 years ago, almost exactly, right? March of 2011, when Barack Obama was in El Salvador to deal specifically with the issues of immigration. So it's been 10 years since an American president has focused his attention, right, on this situation and on Central America directly, since somebody has been there. So this is going to be a big deal for Vice President Harris to go to Central America. Now, why is she doing this? I think there are 2 reasons. One is an optics situation, right? Republicans have been hammering the administration for not doing more about this situation, right? For example, right, the Republican leader in the House, Kevin McCarthy, said just a few days ago on Wednesday that, it's been 3 weeks since Vice President Biden appointed VP Harris to oversee the border. Since then, the crisis has only continued to spiral out of control. So this is a way for them to show that she's doing something, right? The White House has made it very clear that she's tasked not specifically with the situation at the border, but rather with the flow of migrants in Central America to the United States. So it's a little bit of a distinction they're making there, but basically they're saying, look, her job is to try to stop these folks from coming here in the first place, not to deal with what is happening at the border itself. And that's why they've been talking so much about these root causes, right? How we're going to try to address what's happening. And I think most of us in Mexico and many people in the United States understand, or at least many people in this field understand, that the root causes are violence and poverty, right? I mean, most people don't just pick up, their entire lives or send their children unaccompanied to cross thousands of kilometers from their hometown to the United States, right? I mean, everybody in Central America understands that's a dangerous journey. You're going, chances of you as a migrant, right, or as an asylum seeker, whoever you are, when you're traveling from, so let's say El Salvador to the United States, right? There's a high chance that you're going to get something's going to happen to you, right? Someone's going to abuse you, especially if you're a woman, right? Someone's going to rob you. You might get the cartels might try to force you to work for them, right? Which happens pretty often. And so this is not a journey that people undertake because they just think it's a good idea. They don't just wake up one day and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to the US today and I'm going to go, try to find a democracy and freedom. That's not why people are going from Central America, right? They're going because they can't feed their families in their home countries, and because they're exposed to such a level of violence that they think that this incredibly dangerous, difficult, arduous journey is better for them than staying where they are. And so that's what Vice President Harris is going to try to look at. This makes sense, right? The Biden administration is not the first administration in the US to focus on trying to address the root causes. The Obama administration did too. And it's hard, right? Not just because sometimes it's not entirely clear how to address those causes, but also because it's not just about throwing money at a problem. Right, the U.S. has tried that before, and oftentimes because of corruption in these Central American countries, because of inefficiency, the money that is provided isn't actually going to what it should be going to. So it's not just an issue of, oh, here's some money, fix it. It really requires a deeper level of intervention. I think that's what Vice President Harris is going to try to achieve when she visits Guatemala, when she meets with the Guatemalan leaders. And hopefully, we're not sure yet if she's going to, but hopefully she will also visit the border, the Mexico-Guatemala border, and see the conditions there, because the conditions on a humanitarian level are not particularly great. And so this is a positive development. I'm very much in favor of her going. Yes, it's an optics thing, but the Biden administration really does care about this from a policy perspective, from a human perspective, and they're going to try to do the best they can here.
Yeah, I agree. It's like showing a message that they care about the situation in Central America, and they're just not leaving it to USA. Like, it's not going to be just former Ambassador Samantha Power dealing with the expenses of how much it will cost to generate more jobs, or addressing more routes regarding the training of the troops for fighting the violence. I don't believe this is the approach that President Biden wants to take regarding the situation of immigration in Central America, because he has seen, he has experienced it as a vice president, because he was also in charge, not as a way as Kamala is, but he was also aware of the situation that was going on in the southern border. Now that he's president, he wants to take this seriously. And I think that's a positive point, not only for the United States, but also for Mexico. That is like the middle country where migrants have to get through for going to the United States. And it's a country where the dangers and the exposure really happens, because let's remember what happened 2 months ago with these Guatemalan migrants that were burned and killed in the border with Tamaulipas and the state of Texas. It was really an unfortunate event, a disgrace, but it shows the reality. It shows the reality that happens to migrants when they try to cross in the United States. So, Valeria, the same questions, but I want to add, how would be the ideal pathway that President Biden should take regarding this situation? Because there will be some critiques saying that this is United States interventionism in Central America at some point. And let's remember that there's an historical background of the United States interfering into the affairs of Central American countries. and they're skeptical about the amount of intervention that probably this visit of President Kamala Harris will represent in the long-term and middle-term relation. What can we expect regarding this?
So I think Dr. Stone covered most of it. First, before talking about the skepticism regarding American interventionism, I believe that it's important to discuss Kamala Harris's address, where she talked about this visit, and she places strong emphasis on hope. So her message was, it's all about hope. It's about giving migrants hope. It's about giving them hope that if they stay there, things will get better and that help is on the way. So I think that lies with what Dr. Stone said, that it's all about symbolism. This administration knows the power that symbolism has, how the right message can inspire people or influence people, because at the end of the day, politicians do influence people. And I also believe that it's interesting that she talked about, so aside from the root causes that Dr. Stone mentioned, such as poverty and violence, she also talked about climate change and then the lack of opportunities, because there's this huge problem in most of Latin America, also in Mexico. It's not only Central America, it's also in those countries that are considered like the most developed, which I do not agree with. In Latin America, it's this huge problem of like people fleeing from Latin America in search of better academic opportunities, job opportunities, life opportunities. Like you said, it's not like one person wakes up one day and they say, oh yeah, today I'm going to cross all of Mexico, risk extortion, kidnappings, rape, violence, my life, just to get to the US. Like, they do it out of desperation. They do it when they have exhausted all of their options and when they do not see another option. So I think it's important to come at this with an empathy point of view. And that, I think that's what the Biden administration has to do. They have to realize that they're doing this because they have no other options. I do not know what the solution is. I think it will be the biggest problem of the Biden administration so far. It's not going to be a war. It's not going to be COVID because they're dealing with it. It's not going to be climate change because they're getting back into it. It's going to be migration. And I don't think he'll be able to find a plan that everyone will be happy with. But I do think that as long as he does better than Trump, and he also does better than Obama, because Obama is, I think, was the president with the most deportations. So that's an important thing to take into account. Stop deporting people, because when you're deporting someone, you're sending them back to what they fled from. You're sending them back to those risks. It's not an easy situation. So I think, again, the problem should be treated with empathy. And regarding the skepticism about Kamala's visit, I think as long as they keep most of their actions focused on economic matters to help the country or create programs that will help the country, then people will not be as skeptical. There will always be a level of skepticism regarding the US's intervention in Latin America, in any country, because we've seen it before. We've seen the CIA get involved in coup d'etats. We've seen what happens when an American company is screwed over by the government. So I think people will always be skeptical, but as long as they stay out of politics and focus more on economic issues and how to help people, and then also focus on the people that they already have either at their border or at their detention centers waiting for their asylum application. They should focus more on the ones that are already there and not focus solely on the people inside the country, because some of them might not even want to leave.
Yes,
yeah, I would agree with all of that, and I would say one more thing, right, to emphasize. I think you're right that this is going to be the biggest challenge of the Biden administration and maybe the next administration or whatever after these 4 years, because it's the one area where there aren't clear solutions, right? You kind of really suggested this, right? Climate change, we know what we've got to do. We've just got to do it, right? With COVID, we're learning, we're figuring out what we have to do, and vaccinations can help and so on. So in all of these other areas that are very challenging, there are clear answers. Not so much with this issue of migration, right? I mean, how do you fix these root causes in a way that really gives people, like you said, gives people enough hope that things are going to get better where they are in order to decide to stay, right? And that's going to be an extremely difficult question. What do you do with people who arrive? What do you do with people who arrive and who don't meet the legal requirements for asylum in the United States, right? Again, like you said, you send them back. You're putting them back in harm's way. You're putting them back into the situations they're fleeing, right? For many people, that might be a death sentence. On the other hand, if there's no legal avenue that Congress has approved to allow folks to stay, then you can't legally just let them stay. So Biden has certain tools there, but yeah, you're right. There are no clear answers to how to deal with this, and that's what's going to make this, in some ways, harder than maybe any other issue facing the administration.
I don't want to say the wrong number, but I believe also President Biden shorted the amount of asylum grants that they were going to give to this year. I think he expected to give 150,000 asylum grants, but he said he was going to short the number. I don't remember quite well, but yes, indeed, it's going to be the largest problem of this administration, and is not one that has an easy solution, as you have already said, that climate change, yes, we have to reduce our consumption, reduce our carbon footprint, but as migration is not something that we can control directly, or is not something that is up to our hands. We cannot go to Central America and magically intervene into the people's head and say, stay in your country, stay in the countries. It's not something that the United States government can actually do. What can they do is address the root causes, such as poverty and insecurity, specifically gang violence, these cartels that are in Central America, as we know, the Maras and all these groups. But sticking with the situation of climate change, last week we had this climate summit, climate world leaders on this climate summit. I don't remember quite well the specific name of the summit, but again, President Biden was being the host of this meeting that wants to really reaffirm the commitment of the United States into the international multilateralism spaces, as Donald Trump didn't use them that much. He basically didn't use them at all. And President Biden recognizes the importance of them, and to being active and having the United States in this active role in this climate change summit. And I want to go here with you, Dr. Stone. There was a controversy regarding a Mexican statement regarding the way that migration and climate change should be addressed as a mixed perspective. What can we say about this meeting of leaders regarding the climate?
Sure, if it's okay, I'll talk sort of generally about the meeting, and then I'll let Valeria talk about the specifics. I know this is close to her heart, so this is an issue that she cares about. So generally, right, there are a couple things about the meeting to understand. First, one is that this was sort of Biden's chance to show the world that the U.S. really is back into the climate change movement, right, so to speak. It's not just rejoining Paris, right, the Paris Agreement. It's not just these statements that he's made. It's actually putting some commitments on paper and into the world, and having a chance to reconnect with all of these leaders. The world is very skeptical of the U.S.'s claims to have now returned to this, not because they don't think the Biden administration is committed to it, they do, but because they think that Congress isn't going to do what it needs to do, which they may be right about, and they're afraid, right? What happens if in 3.5 years Joe Biden loses re-election, or Kamala Harris loses election, and Donald Trump comes back, right? Or someone who is perhaps even scarier than Donald Trump. I could think of a few names. And so the point is, many of these leaders are very skeptical. They're treating this carefully. So this was a chance for the U.S. to kind of say, hey, we really are back. We're going to try to sort of celebrate this, right? We want to see this. We knew going into it that basically no leaders were going to make big new commitments on climate change. The commitments that really were made here by the United States. So this was kind of a way for the Biden administration to say, we're back, we're here, we want to sort of celebrate this, we're going to make these commitments in this very public forum. But most other countries were not prepared to make new commitments. We're not prepared to talk about how they've achieved or not achieved, right, their current commitments. And so, the impact on a global level of this summit, I think, is fairly limited, but it does help to reinforce, right, that the U.S. really is back now. About whether the two issues are connected, right, immigration and climate change. The U.S. has said it wants to keep the issues separate, at least in its relationship with Mexico. Are they connected, right, in terms of policy? Sure, right, to some degree they are, right? Climate change is going to make everything worse, just like you were saying earlier, Valeria was saying earlier. It's going to make migration worse. It's going to make poverty worse. It's going to make crime worse. I mean, it's going to have an impact everywhere, right? But specifically, this specific statement that you want to talk about, I think I'll hand it off to Valeria, and she can tell us more about exactly what happened and why this is as controversial as it is in Mexico.
Well, first off, I think it's important to begin with the fact that this climate summit lasted for 2 days. López Obrador believed that he did not have to log in until he was speaking. So instead of being there bright and early, he sent the ever-present Chancellor Marcelo Ebrard, who was also at another summit that happened on the same day regarding vaccines with the Ibero-American countries. But for this, so he was doing his Mañanera conference, which is basically a monologue of President López Obrador, where he says 80% lies, 20% half-truths of what's going on in Mexico. And then when he did decide to speak, he said that Mexico would now be cutting down their import of gas. So, but that is ironic. Why? Because one of his landmark projects is building a refinery. The Dos Bocas refinery is one of his biggest projects of the administration. He's always touting it. And it's like right next to the Tren Maya, it's the biggest thing that his administration is going to do, according to him. So it's ironic to go in a climate change summit, talk about reducing emissions, talk about reducing greenhouse gases, switching to cleaner energies, and then López Obrador is just talking about just not importing gasoline. Why? Because Mexico is going to produce it. So it's the same. It doesn't matter if it's being imported from Venezuela or if it's being imported from the Middle East. It's still going to be the same level of contamination because it's still being made. It's not like he said, oh, we're not going to do it. He just said, we're going to change who does it. And this also comes right with the whole topic of the industrial electric reform, which gives more power to the Federal Commission for electricity, which has been criticized because it will take a lot of power producing capabilities from cleaner energy sources, and also the reform that was passed this week for the hydrocarbons law, which basically it deletes everything that the Peña Nieto's administration did regarding letting Pemex control the market. So they took Pemex as the main, like as the monopoly of, well, no. They stopped Pemex from being the monopoly, and then other gas companies came into Mexico. But now it's all being reversed. Once again, Pemex is going to have the monopoly. The government's going to be able to suspend the permits to other companies for supplying it, for producing oil. So it's going to be a huge mess. And for a leader that claims to be so left-leaning and the new transformation, this is not a new transformation. Well, it is a transformation, but it's like a transformation going back to Mexico in the 70s. This is not another type of transformation. So rant over regarding his policies. But yeah, it was a mess. His participation was a mess. And he took the opportunity to speak about the Sembrando Vidas program, which he had explicitly been told not to talk about because the topic of the summit was climate change, not migration. But I'll let you discuss that, Antonio.
Yeah, it's inevitable to be worried when the policy or the policy plan to address climate change is stop importing oil and instead producing it yourself. Like at the end of the day, you're producing or you're contributing to the pollution of the world. Like I don't see no difference as an argument regarding we're going to have energetic sovereignty now, we're not going to pollute anymore. I don't see the relation of not polluting and having energetic sovereignty, which he understands as having built a new refinery, as Valeria said, in Dos Bocas, and also violating at some point the TEMEC regarding the new reforms to the fossil fuels and to the electric industry. We have seen several members of Congress writing letters to President Biden and to the United States Trade Representative, Ambassador Tai, saying that these actions that Mexican government is taking is basically violating what is stated in TEMEC, because it's not fostering the competitiveness among the enterprises. It's just giving more power to CFE, which is our Federal Electric Commission, and to Pemex, which is Mexican oil company, basically a state-owned company. López Obrador, as Valeria just mentioned, he believes that mixing topics in these multilateral forums is a good idea. I believe it wasn't the time or space to propose this situation. I think we all could see the awkward faces or the uncomfortable situation that all of the leaders were in when he was saying these things, especially President Biden, because he has dealt with López Obrador in the past calls, and he has been insistent regarding that he wants to extend this program to Central America by having the United States aiding them. This doesn't seem to be so crazy or so out of perspective if we hear it that way. But when we hear that President López Obrador was also making a proposal that these people that were planting the trees could be granted a 6 months visa to work in the United States, and after 6 years of those visas granted, I don't know, is citizenship or permanent residence, but this is not something that is up to the decisions of President López Obrador. He cannot intervene into the migration policy of the United States. That's something that just only corresponds to the United States Congress, and not to Mexico's president. So I think that was a wrong message and a point of friction that he again caused with the Biden administration. I don't know if you, Dr. Stone, have something to say about it, about this friction or this situation. How does this legally will impact at some point?
Yeah, it's also just that the program is, the program's just never going to happen. I mean, the program might happen, right? A guest worker program, as we've said before on the show, is a good idea, and it's something that is good for American businesses. It's good for Mexicans, Central Americans who might be a part of it, right? It's good for everybody. But a guest worker program that then turns into a pathway to citizenship through a permanent residency is just not going to happen. I mean, we might see a path to citizenship, maybe for the undocumented immigrants already in the United States, right? But the whole idea of a guest worker program, at least for many moderates and conservatives in the United States, is precisely so that they don't stay permanently, right? So that they go and work for a few months out of the year, they make good money, right, compared at least to what they would make in their home countries, and then they go back home, right? That's the point of it, at least for many moderates, and I think not just in the Republican Party, but in the Democratic Party as well, at least in the Democratic Senate. And so the idea that you're going to have a pathway to citizenship for folks who are, going on this guest worker program is it's just not real, right? So it's just not going to happen. There's no way that it gets through the U.S. Senate. I don't think very much on migration is going to get through the U.S. Senate anyway. I hope I'm wrong. Yeah, but giving a pathway to citizenship after 6 years for folks who are going to the U.S. on a guest worker program just is not what Republicans and what some moderate Democrats have in mind when they're thinking guest worker program. So just from that perspective, I think obviously world leaders can say whatever they want and whatever fora they want. Whether it's a good idea or not to say it is a different question. Yeah, and in this case, it probably wasn't the best place or time to bring it up, especially when there's really very little chance of it becoming law in the United States. So yeah, I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't bother me that much. I just think it's another sort of example of picking the wrong time and the wrong place to say something on the international stage. It isn't really advancing Mexico's interests very much at all.
I agree. And just to wrap up this program that has been pretty interesting, we have discussed lots of topics regarding, again, migration, but also climate change that I do believe is an important issue to be addressed, probably in the top 3 of the agenda. We saw last week that the jury in Minnesota found guilty Derek Chauvin, the cop who murdered George Floyd last April or May. I don't remember. I think it was April 2020. We saw the big scandal that this case got into. Lots of protests, lots of Black Lives Matter movements regarding the situation and the structural violence that African American people in the United States suffer from a state or systematic level perspective. 11 months later, justice occurred. I do believe it was a landmark point that we have to say regarding the commitment also of this administration, this Biden administration, through social justice, and the jury found Derek Chauvin guilty. Valeria, do you have any final comments regarding this situation?
I think justice was done. I think what had to happen happened. I'm glad that it reached a verdict. I do not agree with what Nancy Pelosi said. She was heavily criticized for saying that George Floyd had to die for justice being made. So that justice was made. He did not have to die. He's not a martyr. He was killed. And I'm glad that despite the fact that he was killed and that he suffered terribly, because if you have seen the video or even a snippet of the video, it's heart-wrenching. It's horrible. I'm glad that his family got justice. I'm glad that Derek Chauvin is going to prison. I'm glad that he was convicted because he hasn't been sentenced yet. I hope he gets the maximum sentence for either of his crimes. I think he will look at a long time in jail. I hope that he looks at a long time in jail. You were right. He was killed in May 25th of 2020 in Minnesota. And I hope that this keeps on sparking the whole movement of looking at how the police is trained, how the police reacts to stuff, and how it works. Because this is not the first, neither the last incident of police brutality. The day that Derek Chauvin was convicted, there were news of a girl that was play fighting, and the police was called and she was killed. She did not deserve to die. Neither of the victims of police brutality deserve to die. So I think that the US needs to fix this problem immediately. That while it may not reach headlines outside of the US as much as other topics do, it's one of the biggest problems inside of the US.
Yeah, I mean, as we said before, right, on this program, it's just police violence against minorities, especially against African Americans, is a long-standing problem in the United States. It's been happening literally forever, right, ever since emancipation. The situation of slaves, former slaves, right, in the United States did not get any better during the 100 years that followed in the Jim Crow era. And while things have been getting to some degree better since the Civil Rights Act of 1964, right, we still have, as we know, lots and lots of police brutality against minorities, especially against Blacks. The Derek Chauvin trial and conviction is really historic. I believe he's only the 7th police officer, non-federal police officer, to be found guilty of something in the last 20 years or so. So there really are not very many. And I might have that number off, it might be 6th. But there aren't very many convictions. Most of the time, even when there is video of the incident, police officers, right, who are usually white, get off. The jury either finds them not guilty or cannot come to a consensus, right? All 12 of them in most states have to vote yes on guilt in order to convict. Sometimes there's 1 or 2 people on the jury who simply are refusing to convict, and so the police officer is not convicted. So the fact that he was convicted is a huge deal, right? It's historic. It's important. Hopefully, it will move the conversation forward. How much it'll actually change police practices, I don't know. I mean, like Valeria, just like you just said, right? The video is heart-wrenching. The video is clear. The video is, unquestionable when you watch it, right? And the fact that many of us still were surprised. It was a positive surprise, right? But you're still surprised that he was convicted. Just goes to how deeply entrenched sort of institutional racism is in American society, is in American institutions. And so is it going to, is this conviction going to change a lot? I don't know. I'm kind of pessimistic about it. I don't know if it's going to really make a huge difference, but it's going to make a difference for the family of George Floyd. And, it's at least the first time, I believe, that one of these cases has been followed this closely, right? Even like the officers, for example, that have killed other high profile, right, African Americans who've become high profile cases of this in the last few years, last 10 years or so. Most of their cases did not gain the same prominence that the Derek Chauvin trial did gain.
Justice.
Yeah, right. And in most of those cases, there was no justice. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is it's a big deal. It's historic. It needed to happen, right? Is it going to really change how we address these issues of police brutality? I'm not sure. Yeah, but at least it has forced all of us to focus on the issue again. And unfortunately, that seems to be what it takes sometimes, is these terrible situations like the murder of George Floyd and everything that's happened since, to force us as a society to really turn around and look at this. Is that the right thing? Well, no, right? We should be dealing with this long before these murders, because it's what it is, right? As the jury decided, this was the murder of George Floyd, as we've been calling it for a long time, right? We need to stop these before they happen. But unfortunately, sometimes what it has taken in the United States is this sort of situation for us to focus on it. How long he's going to get as a sentence, who knows? In Minnesota, so he was found guilty on 3 counts, but 2 of the counts, third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter, are both what we call lesser included counts in the second-degree murder, which means he's really going to be convicted on second-degree murder, and that's it. And so the maximum penalty he could receive is 40 years. In prison in the state of Minnesota. However, he is a first-time offender, right? He's never been convicted of a crime before, and under state sentencing guidelines, he's more likely to get somewhere in the range of like 10 to 15 years. But still, right, that is a very, very significant difference, right, than him simply getting off, right, and not being convicted and not having to face any justice for what is just so clearly murder. The final thing I'll say, what we need to look at next is what's going to happen to the charges against those 3 police officers who just stood there and watched, right? At the scene of George Floyd's murder, there were 3 other police officers. They stayed and watched. They did not act. They did not intervene. They did not try to stop Chauvin. They didn't say anything. They simply tried to keep the other people who were there watching and filming, non-police officers, away, right, from what was happening, so they could not provide any help. So I'm very curious to see how is a jury going to handle what these police officers did by not intervening, and what that means for the future of these cases in the U.S.
Yeah, and it's crazy that the one that filmed this was a teenager of 17 years. Like the level of trauma that you develop from filming and seeing that live, and then her name kept being brought up. I know that she's a minor, so I do not want to say her name. Do not want to add to all of the things that she's already being talked about. But it was a minor. She was 17 and she filmed that. I have no words. Like, and I wish it had stopped something, but it hasn't. Like, there was, aside from the girl that was killed on the same day that Floyd was, there was the case of Donta Wright, who was also killed by police brutality, also in Minnesota. Like, how is it still going on?
Yeah, and unfortunately, the African American community is just way too used to this. I mean, it's terrible that this has become sort of a normal part. I mean, people know, right? Put their hands up. For example, there was another case. There's a police officer. There were white police officers who stopped a Black Army officer. He's a Black Army officer, right, in uniform. He was driving his vehicle. I believe it was in Texas. This was a couple months ago, back in December. And they pulled him over because supposedly his back license plate was not visible, except that it was there. Once they pulled up close to him, they could see that. And they immediately, and then they thought he was fleeing, even though he wasn't. So they got out of their car and they pointed a gun directly at him in his vehicle, and they were yelling conflicting orders. One was telling him to get out of the car. The other one was telling him not to put his hands down. Of course, how do you get out of the car without putting your hands down to unbuckle your seatbelt and open the door, right? And eventually, when they pulled him out of the car, he was beat. Right. At one point, one of the officers said that he was. They used a term that I wasn't familiar with, but basically references the electric chair. It was just pretty brutal, and he's now suing. In the end, he wasn't charged with anything, and he's now suing that police officer. But my point is, even as a U.S. Army officer in uniform, Black people in the United States just know that you could be subjected to this sort of treatment. And it's really unfortunate. So I thought about this because you said about the 17-year-old girl who filmed it, right? Unfortunately, this is a trauma that the African-American community carries with it on a regular basis, all the time, at all ages. And it's really something that just needs to end. We're not going to be able to really move forward as a society in the United States until we've resolved until we found justice for these centuries of injustice against minorities, different minority groups in general, but in particular against African Americans.
Yeah, I believe that the most important point is that justice prevailed in this case. It should prevail in all cases. Well, I would like to thank Valeria and Dr. Samuel Stone for joining this program. Indeed, it was pretty interesting. We talked several things regarding several topics. And we will see you, or dear spectators, next Monday at 4 p.m. Remember, at the Build Lab. Thank you.